That afternoon, the once peaceful street suddenly became chaotic. Mrs. Lon, a 78-year-old woman, was awkwardly trying to cross the street at a busy intersection. Although the light was green, her old legs moved slowly, making it take her longer to get to the other side of the street. When the light turned red, she was still in the middle of the street. The young police officer Tran Hung was directing traffic at the intersection that day. He was already having a bad day. His wife had just filed for divorce, his superiors were constantly pressuring him, and now, an old woman was disrupting the flow of traffic he was supposed to control. His anger flared, and he approached Mrs. Lon. "Old lady, don't you know how to read traffic lights? It's red and you're still going. Do you want to cause an accident for everyone?" The police officer shouted loudly, his tone sarcastic and disrespectful. "I can fine you for disturbing traffic order." Mrs. Lon cowered, her old eyes filled with tears. She stammered, "My dear, I'm going slowly, I'm sorry."
I tried my best. The policeman did not consider her explanation. He continued to scold, "If you can't walk, then stay home. Why go out and make others suffer? Don't you see that everyone is waiting for you?" The passers-by around began to stir. Some took out their phones to record, others shook their heads in displeasure, but no one dared to intervene in the face of the policeman's aggressive attitude. At that moment, a muscular man stepped out of a luxury car parked nearby. It was none other than Mike Tyson, the former world heavyweight boxing champion, who was on a business trip to Vietnam. He had witnessed the whole incident through the car window. Mike Tyson walked quickly towards the scene, his face solemn but restrained. His muscular body created a presence that could not be ignored. His interpreter quickly followed. "Excuse me, what's going on?" Mike Tyson asked through the interpreter, his tone calm but authoritative. The policeman froze when he realized who he was talking to. He stammered, "This is a traffic problem. This old lady is crossing the street incorrectly." Mike Tyson looked at the trembling Mrs. Lon, then turned to the policeman. "I understand your job can be stressful, but there's no reason to talk to an elderly person like that. She could be your own mother or grandmother." Through the interpreter, Mike continued, "When I was young, I made many mistakes because I couldn't control my anger. Now I understand that true strength comes from respect and patience." The policeman lowered his head in shame, not daring to respond. The surrounding crowd began to applaud Mike Tyson's actions. Mike gently approached Mrs. Lon, bent down, and asked her through the interpreter, "Are you okay? Where do you need to go? I can help you." Mrs. Lon was still frightened, but felt more secure with Mike's presence. She said she was on her way to the clinic to get medicine, but walked because her children and grandchildren were busy and couldn't take her. Mike Tyson gently said, "Let me take you." He reached out to help Mrs. Lon, carefully guiding her to his car. The driver opened the door, and Mike helped her sit comfortably in the seat. Before leaving, Mike turned back to look at the policeman. "A civilized society is measured by how they treat the weak. Remember that." The car slowly rolled away, leaving behind a bustling crowd of people talking and a policeman deeply contemplating his actions. At the clinic, Mike Tyson not only waited for Mrs. Lon to get her medicine but also made sure she was thoroughly examined by doctors. He discovered that Mrs. Lon lived alone in a small house, her children were far away, and only came to visit occasionally. Before taking her home, Mike Tyson stopped by a nearby supermarket, bought food and necessities for her. He also left the phone number of an interpreter and some money so she could call a taxi whenever she needed to go to the doctor. The story of Mike Tyson's heroic act quickly spread on social media. Many people shared a video recording the moment the former boxing champion protected an old Vietnamese woman from the disrespectful attitude of a police officer. A week later, police officer Tran Hung suddenly appeared at Mrs. Lan's house with a bouquet of flowers and a sincere apology. He reflected a lot on his actions and decided to change his approach to work. "I apologize for the way I spoke to you that day," he said, his voice full of remorse. "I forgot the core value of my job, which is to protect and serve people, especially the vulnerable like you." Mrs. Lon smiled forgivingly. From then on, the young policeman often visited her, helping her with heavy tasks and taking her to see doctors when needed. As for Mike Tyson, before leaving Vietnam, he established a small fund to support the elderly who have difficulty in traveling and taking care of their health. He said, "I believe that true strength is shown through how we treat others, especially those who are unable to protect themselves." The story of Mike Tyson and the old Vietnamese woman has become a symbol of kindness and respect, reminding people that status or physical strength is not as important as the strength of humanity and compassion. That morning started like any other for Mrs. Nguyen Thi Lan, a 78-year-old woman living in a small alley in Hai Ba Trung District, Hanoi. Mrs. Lan woke up at 5 in the morning, a habit she had kept since her youth. Her small house was quiet. Her eldest son had moved his family to Canada many years ago, and her youngest daughter worked in Ho Chi Minh City, only coming home to visit her mother once every 3 months. Mrs. Lan slowly prepared a simple breakfast, a bowl of white porridge with a little sesame salt and some herbs. Her thin hands trembled slightly as she carried the bowl of porridge to the worn wooden table. On the wall, family photos were carefully hung for memories of happy times when the whole family was together, before her husband, Mr. Hung, passed away from heart disease 7 years ago. Mrs. Lan glanced at the old clock on the wall. It was 8:30, she had to get ready to go get medicine at the clinic about 2 kilometers from her house. Normally, the neighbor's granddaughter would take her, but today she had an important college entrance exam. She tried to call a taxi through the app her granddaughter had installed for her, but her old fingers fumbled with the smartphone, and she couldn't complete the booking. "Well, I'll have to walk," she told herself, slowly changing into neat clothes and taking the bamboo stick placed next to the bed. Before leaving the house, she carefully checked her medical records, health insurance card, and a small envelope containing money. She locked the door carefully and slowly walked out onto the street. At the same time, at a luxury hotel in the center of Hanoi, Mike Tyson was preparing for the 3rd day of his business trip to Vietnam. The former world heavyweight boxing champion came to Vietnam at the invitation of a large corporation to promote a new line of sports products. This was his first time in Vietnam, and he was fascinated by the culture, people, and cuisine here. "What's on our agenda today, Peter?" Mike asked his manager and interpreter. Peter, a Vietnamese American, replied, "In the morning, I have an interview with Thanh Nien newspaper at 10 a.m., followed by a fan meeting at Trang Tien Plaza at 2 p.m. In the evening, we have dinner with the company's leaders." Mike nodded, mentally preparing for another busy day. At 59, Mike Tyson was no longer the fierce boxer in the ring. Instead, he had become a symbol of transformation and maturity. The turbulent years had taught him valuable lessons about restraint, respect, and the value of calmness. "I need to go for a walk before starting the day," Mike said. "My mind is clearer when I breathe fresh air." Peter nodded. "I'll tell the driver to prepare the car. We can stop by Hong Kim Lake, it's beautiful in the morning." Mike agreed, and they left the hotel in a luxury SUV with tinted windows to avoid unwanted attention. Police officer Tran Minh Hum, 32, is having a bad morning. He has just received news that his wife has filed for divorce after 3 years of marriage and countless arguments. His phone is buzzing with angry messages from his wife and demands from his superiors for a quarterly public order report. Hung is assigned to direct traffic at a busy intersection near the district clinic, which is always crowded during rush hour. It is one of the most traffic-intensive areas, with hundreds of motorbikes, cars, and pedestrians jostling for space and a limited area. "How can I concentrate on work when my life is falling apart?" Hum mumbles, sweating under the harsh Hanoi morning sun. At that moment, Mrs. Lan approaches the intersection. She slowly approaches the crosswalk, waiting for the light to turn green. When the pedestrian light turned green, she carefully stepped onto the road, leaning on her cane, each step slow and cautious. But the green light for pedestrians only lasted 20 seconds, too short for her tired legs. When she had only walked about 2/3 of the way, the light started flashing and turned red. The traffic on both sides began to move, and Mrs. Lan stood rooted to the spot in the middle of the road, not knowing what to do. She tried to walk faster, but her body no longer obeyed her as before. Police officer Hung saw this scene and felt his anger rising. He blew his horn loudly, signaling for the vehicles to stop, then walked quickly towards Mrs. Lan. "Old lady, don't you know how to read traffic lights? Can't you see it's red?" Hung shouted loudly, his tone angry and impatient. "Are you intentionally causing an accident for others by walking like this?" Mrs. Lan was startled, almost falling over in fear. She stammered, "My dear. I didn't have time to cross the street, the light changed too quickly. Don't make excuses. If you can't walk, stay home, don't go out and bother others. Hung continued to scold. Do you know you're obstructing traffic? I can fine you for not obeying traffic signals. Tears began to roll down Mrs. Land's wrinkled face. She lowered her head, her hands trembling as she gripped her cane. Around her, passers-by began to stop to observe, but no one dared to speak up in the face of the police officer's aggressive attitude. A young girl timidly spoke up, "Officer, she's old, just drive slowly." "Shut up. This is my job." Hun shouted back, causing the girl to back away in fear. The SUV carrying Mike Tyson happened to be parked nearby, waiting for a red light. Through the car window, Mike witnessed the whole thing. He frowned, feeling uncomfortable with what was happening. "Peter, what's going on?" Mike asked his interpreter. Peter strained his ears and answered, "The police officer is scolding an old lady for not crossing the street before the light turned red. He's threatening to fine her and saying some very nasty things." Mike frowned, "Stop the car. I want to get out and see." "But Mike, we have an interview scheduled." "Stop the car," Mike repeated, his voice firm. "I can't sit still while I watch this." The SUV stopped, and Mike Tyson got out, followed by Peter. The appearance of the former world boxing champion immediately attracted the attention of everyone around. Many recognized him and began whispering and pointing. Mike approached the scene, his muscular body creating an undeniable presence. Police Officer Hum continued to scold Mrs. Lan, unaware of Mike's presence. "Excuse me," Mike said, his voice low and calm. Peter quickly translated. Hung turned around, intending to yell at the person who had interrupted, but froze when he realized who was standing in front of him. The cop's mouth fell open in surprise. Mike Tyson?" Hung stammered, not believing his eyes. "That's right," Mike nodded, then pointed at Mrs. Lan. "What's going on? Why are you talking to the old lady like that?" Hum was confused. "This is a traffic problem, this old lady is crossing the street illegally." Mike stepped closer, his eyes firm but not aggressive. "I understand that your job can be stressful, but there's no reason to talk to an old person like that. You know, she could be your own mother or grandmother." Peter translated Mike's words, and the crowd around him began to nod in agreement. Mike continued, "I used to be a hot-tempered person, I made many mistakes because I couldn't control my anger. Now I understand that true strength is not the ability to defeat others, but how we treat those weaker than us." Hum lowered his head, not daring to look Mike straight in the eye. He muttered, I'm sorry." Mike Tyson gently approached Mrs. Lan, crouching down to her level. Through his gentle eyes, he tried to convey warmth and safety. "Are you okay?" Mike asked. Peter translated. Mrs. Lan was still stunned, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you. I'm going to get medicine at the clinic." Peter translated for Mike, and he nodded sympathetically. "Are you going alone? Where are your children and grandchildren? Your son is in Canada, your daughter is in Saigon, you live alone," Mrs. Lan said softly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Mike turned to look at Peter, then back at Mrs. Lan. "Let me take you. Where is the clinic you want to go to?" When Peter translated, Mrs. Lan was surprised. "Oh, no need. I can go by myself." "Don't be shy," Mike smiled kindly. "I'm happy to help you." With Peter's help, Mike gently helped Mrs. Lan stand up and led her to the waiting SUV. The driver hurriedly opened the door, and Mike carefully helped her into the back seat comfortably. Before getting in the car, Mike turned back to look at the police officer Hum, who was standing silently, looking ashamed. "Remember, how we treat others, especially the weak, will define who we are." The crowd had gathered more, many people recognized Mike Tyson and started taking pictures and videos. Some applauded his actions. "How beautiful! Mike Tyson protects an old Vietnamese woman. What an admirable image. Who says foreigners don't understand Vietnamese culture? He understands it better than that police officer." Gossip echoed everywhere, and Hum felt his face burning with shame. In the car, Mrs. Lam was still in shock. She looked at the muscular man sitting next to her with gratitude, even though she didn't know who he was. "Who are you?" she asked, referring to Peter. Peter smiled. "This is Mike Tyson, a world-famous boxer, ma'am." Mrs. Lon nodded, even though she didn't know much about boxing or Mike's reputation. She only knew that this man had appeared as a savior when she was in a difficult situation. "Where are you from?" she asked. "America," Peter translated Mike's answer. "Oh, it's so far away," Mrs. Lam was surprised. "Are you coming to Vietnam for tourism?" Mike smiled. "I came here for work, but I really like the country and people of Vietnam." When Peter translated, Mrs. Land's eyes filled with tears. "You're so kind. Thank you so much." The SUV stopped in front of the clinic. Mike and Peter helped Mrs. Lan out of the car and went inside with her. The people and medical staff in the clinic were stunned to see Mike Tyson, especially when they saw him helping an old Vietnamese woman. Mrs. Lam was given priority to be examined immediately. While she was being examined by the doctor, Mike and Peter waited in the waiting room. Others around kept glancing and whispering about Mike's appearance. "We'll miss the interview," Peter reminded. Mike shrugged. "I'll call and apologize and rearrange. This is more important." An hour later, Mrs. Lan returned with a bag of medicine. She walked over to Mike and Peter, her face brighter. "Can I take you home?" Mike asked Peter. Mrs. Lan nodded gratefully. On the way home, she told Mike about her life, about her youth as a primary school teacher, about her husband who died, and about her children who were now far away. "Aren't you lonely?" Mike asked, genuinely concerned. Mrs. Lan smiled softly. "I'm used to it, my dear. It's like this when you're old, you have to accept it." When Mike arrived in front of Mrs. Land's small house in the alley, he was a little surprised. He didn't expect her to live in such simple conditions. "Would you like to come in for a drink?" Mrs. Lan asked, her voice timid. Mike smiled. "I'm honored." Part 4, An Indelible Mark. In Mrs. Land's small house, Mike Tyson sat on a simple wooden chair, looking around the simple but clean living room. The white walls were decorated with old family photos, a set of worn wooden tables and chairs, and a small TV placed on an old shelf. Mrs. Lam was busy in the kitchen, preparing tea and cakes to treat her guests. Mike realized that the electrical system in her house was quite old, and many of the appliances seemed to have been used for many years. "How long have you lived here alone?" Mike asked when Mrs. Lam brought out the tea tray. Peter translated the question, and Mrs. Lan answered, "Since your husband passed away, 7 years ago. Your children want you to go to Canada to live with them, but you don't want to leave your homeland. You're used to this place." Mike nodded in understanding. He looked at the old phone placed on the table. "Can you contact your children easily?" "I'm not very tech savvy," Mrs. Lan admitted. "Some of the neighbors sometimes help me video call you. But I always remember your face and forget how to press it." Mike smiled sympathetically. He came up with an idea and discussed it with Peter in English. Peter nodded in agreement, and then they turned back to Mrs. Lan. "Do you go to the doctor regularly?" Mike asked. "Once every 2 weeks," Mrs. Lam replied. "I have heart disease and high blood pressure, and I have to take medication regularly." Mike thought for a moment, then made a decision. "I want to help you a little, if you don't mind." Mrs. Lam was surprised. "Oh, you've helped me so much already, I don't dare accept any more." "Don't be shy," Mike said through Peter. "I want to do this." Afterwards, Mike and Peter took Mrs. Lan shopping for some necessary items. They bought her a simpler, senior-friendly smartphone, with pre-installed apps for video calling and booking rides. Mike also offered to fix some things in her house, the electrical system, the plumbing, and buy some new appliances like a refrigerator and a safer gas stove. Mrs. Lan initially refused, but Mike patiently convinced her that he really wanted to help. "You know," Mike said while they were having dinner at Mrs. Land's house, "I didn't grow up with many nice adults around me. My mother died when I was young, and I didn't really have the chance to take care of her. Maybe that's why I feel so strongly about this, about how we treat our elders." As Peter translated, Mrs. Lam was so moved that she was speechless. All she could do was take Mike's big hand and squeeze it tightly in her small, wrinkled ones. Before leaving, Mike set up a small fund to support Mrs. Lan and assigned Peter to manage it. The fund would ensure she had enough money for transportation, medicine, and other basic needs. I will let her children know about her situation, Mike said. They need to know that she needs more attention. Peter also agreed to check on Mrs. Lan regularly and hire a maid to come to her house twice a week to help with housework and take her to medical appointments. The story of Mike Tyson and the Vietnamese woman quickly spread on social media and media outlets. The video recording the moment Mike defended Mrs. Lan from the police attracted millions of views on YouTube and TikTok. Many Vietnamese people sent their thanks to Mike on his social media pages. Some even went to the hotel where Mike was staying to leave flowers and gifts as a way to express their gratitude. A week after the incident, police officer Tran Man Hung unexpectedly showed up at Mrs. Lan's house with a bouquet of flowers and a sincere apology. He had reflected on his actions, especially after being suspended for 3 days due to the public backlash. "I apologize to you for the way I spoke to you that day," Hung said, his voice filled with remorse. "I forgot the core value of my job, which is to protect her." "I'm sorry for the way I spoke to you that day," Hung said, his voice full of remorse. "I forgot the core value of my job, which is to protect and serve people, especially the vulnerable like you." Mrs. Lan looked at the young police officer with gentle eyes. She understood that sometimes people have moments of weakness, especially when life weighs heavily on them. "It's okay," Mrs. Lan said softly. "I've lived many years, I understand that everyone has difficult times. Maybe you were having a bad day, right?" Hung was surprised by her sympathy. He nodded, tears suddenly welling up in his eyes. "My wife filed for divorce that morning. I felt like my whole world had collapsed." Mrs. Lan sighed. "I understand. But you know, sometimes the biggest events in life are the doors that open to something better. If you hadn't encountered that day, you probably would never have had the opportunity to reflect and change like now." From then on, Hung began to visit Mrs. Lam regularly. At first, he only came to help her with heavy work or take her to the doctor. But gradually, their conversations became deeper. Mrs. Lan, with the experience of a retired old teacher, listened and gave valuable advice to the young man who was struggling with life. Hung began to see his job from a different perspective. He no longer considered traffic control a boring task, but an opportunity to protect and help people. In particular, he paid special attention to the elderly and children when they crossed the street. 3 months after the incident, Mike Tyson returned to Vietnam, this time on a personal trip. He made a special effort to visit Mrs. Lan. Her house had been renovated, with new electricity and water systems, some more modern furniture, and even a large tablet that she was learning to use to video call her children and grandchildren. "You look much better," Mike commented as he entered Mrs. Lan's house, smiling at her radiant appearance. "Thanks to you," Mrs. Lan replied, happily welcoming her distinguished guest. "Everyone in the neighborhood knows about you and me. They often visit me, bring me food and chat with me. I don't feel lonely anymore." Mike was touched to see that the wall in her house now had a new photo, a carefully framed photo of him and Mrs. Lan taken together during their last meeting. "Whenever I miss you, I look at this photo," Mrs. Lan said, her eyes sparkling. "She told everyone about you, about how you helped her. They all said you were a very good person." Mike humbly said, "I just did what anyone should do. But I'm happy that it made a positive difference." Mrs. Lan led Mike to the small garden behind the house, where she had planted more vegetables and flowers. When she's in a good mood, she's motivated to take care of these plants. Her daughter has also visited her more often since she found out. She said she felt guilty for not caring for her as much as she should have. During the conversation, Mike and Mrs. Lan were unexpectedly visited by the local community. They wanted to meet Mike to thank him for helping Mrs. Lan, and also because his actions had created a wave of change in the way local people treated the elderly. "After Ms. Lan's incident, we formed a volunteer group to help the elderly living alone in the neighborhood," a middle-aged woman explained. "We call it the Mike Tyson Project, because he inspired us." Mike was surprised and moved by this information. He did not expect that his small action could create such a big impact. A year after that memorable event, Mike Tyson returned to Vietnam for the 3rd time, but this time with a special mission. With support from the Mike Tyson Foundation and in partnership with local organizations, he officially opened the Mike Lan Senior Care Center in Hanoi, a modern facility that provides day care, medical support and community space for seniors. Mrs. Lan, now 79, stood next to Mike at the opening ceremony, radiant in her traditional AO dye. Her story has become a symbol of a larger movement for respect and care for the elderly in Vietnam. "I never thought that a moment like that could change my life," Mike said at the ceremony. "When I saw Mrs. Lan standing in the middle of the road that day, I just did what I felt was right. But it taught me that even a small moment of kindness can create huge waves of change." Officer Hum, now the Senior Safety Program representative for the Hanoi Police Department, was also present at the ceremony. He turned his traumatic experience into motivation to create positive change in the way police interact with the elderly and vulnerable. "Sometimes the biggest lessons come from our biggest mistakes," Hum shared in his speech. "I was so ashamed of my behavior that day. But thanks to Mrs. Lan's forgiveness and Mike Tyson's example, I learned that we always have the opportunity to become better versions of ourselves." Mrs. Lan's son and daughter, who decided to move back to Vietnam after hearing about their mother's story, sat next to her at the ceremony. They have realized that no career or geographical distance is more important than taking care of their loved ones. "My mother always taught us that love is not just words, but actions," Lan's daughter said, her voice filled with emotion. "But sometimes we forget that lesson. It takes a stranger like Mike Tyson to remind us of the true value of family." 5 years after that memorable event, the Mike Lan Senior Care Center has expanded into a network of 5 locations in major cities in Vietnam. The model has spread to other Southeast Asian countries, with support from the Mike Tyson Foundation and local partners. To mark the center's 5th anniversary, a bronze statue was placed in the park near the intersection where Mike and Lan met, a burly man supporting a small old woman, a simple but powerful symbol of kindness and respect that transcends cultural and age boundaries. Lan, now 83, is still thriving in her old home, which has been renovated into a warm and safe space for seniors. She no longer lives alone, her daughter has moved in with her, and her son visits regularly. Her home has become an informal gathering place for the neighborhood seniors, where they gather to drink tea, play chess, and share stories about life. Mike Tyson, despite his busy global schedule, maintains regular contact with Lan via video call. Every time he visits Vietnam, he makes time to visit her, treating her like family. "You know," Mike said during his most recent visit, "I've met a lot of people in my life, but few have taught me as many lessons as you. You've taught me about resilience, about the power of forgiveness, and about living a meaningful life." Lan smiled, "And you've taught me that heroes can come from the most unexpected places. You've changed not only my life, but the lives of many other seniors." Across Vietnam, senior priority signs have been installed at busy intersections, and green light times for pedestrians have been extended to accommodate the speed of the elderly and people with disabilities. Training on how to interact with the elderly and vulnerable has become a mandatory part of traffic police training. Commissioner Hum, now promoted to head of the Community and Social Security Department of the Hanoi Police Department, told an international public safety conference, "We often think that power comes from authority, from the ability to control others. But real power comes from the ability to control yourself and from compassion. This lesson has changed not only my life but also the way the whole system works." The story of Mike Tyson and Mrs. Lan has become part of modern Vietnamese folklore, a tale told in schools, and ethics training sessions, and in family conversations. It has become a symbol of the power of small acts and how a moment of kindness can change not just a life but an entire community. 10 years after that fateful day, a documentary called "The Moment at the Crossroads" was released, telling the story of Mike Tyson and Ms. Lan, along with the social changes it created. The film was not only shown in Vietnam but also on major international platforms, bringing the message of kindness and respect to a global audience. Sometimes, the real heroes are not those with superpowers, but those who have the compassion and courage to act on their conscience, the film director said at the premiere. Ms. Lan, who is 88 years old but still lucid and healthy, was invited to New York to attend the international premiere of the film. This was the first time in her life she had set foot in the United States. Mike Tyson personally welcomed her at the airport, carrying a bouquet of flowers and his familiar friendly smile. "Did you ever think you would go this far?" Mike asked as they left the airport in a limousine. Mrs. Lan shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. "Never, my dear. I'm just an ordinary old lady in Vietnam. Who would have thought that one day I would come here and meet such wonderful people? At the premiere, the audience gave Mrs. Lan a standing ovation that lasted more than 5 minutes. Many were moved by the story of respect and kindness that transcends cultural and linguistic boundaries. This story is not just about Mike Tyson or Mrs. Lan, commented one film critic. It is a story about the potential for goodness in each of us, the ability to see the value in others and act with respect and compassion. The trip to New York also brought Mrs. Lan another unexpected joy, a reunion with her son and his family from Canada. Mike had secretly arranged for them to be present at the premiere, creating an emotional moment when 3 generations of Mrs. Lan's family reunited on the red carpet. She taught us a lot about courage and dignity, Lan's son said in a later interview. But it was through this story that we truly understood the power of those values. Everyone was curious about the special relationship between Mike Tyson, a former world heavyweight boxing champion, and the little Vietnamese woman. When asked about this, Mike laughed. "She was the one who taught me that true strength does not come from muscle or fame, but from the ability to connect with others on the basis of common humanity. She was not just my friend, she was my teacher." Lan humbly replied, "And you taught me that age, language, or culture are not barriers to true friendship and respect." After a trip to New York, Ms. Lan returned to Vietnam not only with memorable memories but also with a new mission, to establish this Generation Bridge Association, a non-profit organization that connects the elderly with young people through volunteer programs and experience sharing. "We should not see the elderly as a burden or an obstacle," Lan said at the association's launch. "They are living treasures of experience and wisdom. What we need to do is build bridges so that knowledge and love can flow between generations." 20 years after that fateful day, a special ceremony is taking place in a large park called Generation Harmony Park in the heart of Hanoi. Hundreds of people of all ages have gathered to celebrate 2 decades of the movement to respect the elderly that began with the story of Mike Tyson and Ms. Lan. A large statue stands solemnly in the center of the park, not just an image of Mike Tyson and Ms. Lan anymore, but a larger symbol, a human circle, where people of all ages, from children to the elderly, hold hands in a symbol of intergenerational solidarity and respect. Ms. Lan was no longer present at the ceremony. She passed away peacefully 2 years earlier, at the age of 96, surrounded by her children and loved ones. But her legacy lives on through the programs, organizations, and public policies that have been shaped by her story. Mike Tyson, 79 years old but still in good health, flew in from the US to attend the ceremony. He stood on stage, his voice still strong though somewhat shaky with age. 20 years ago, I did something that anyone can do to help someone in need. I never thought that small act would create a movement as big as this. Mrs. Lan taught me, and in doing so taught the world, that respect and compassion are universal values that can connect us across all boundaries." Policeman Hung, now retired after a long career of public service, stood next to Mike on stage. His hair was white, but his eyes were still full of passion. "Sometimes, our biggest mistakes can lead to our biggest lessons. I was so ashamed of my actions that day. But thanks to Mrs. Lan's forgiveness and Mike's example, I learned that we are not defined by our mistakes, but by how we get up and become better." The ceremony ended with a special performance. Hundreds of elders and children came together to perform a traditional Vietnamese dance that had been adapted so that all ages could participate. It was a powerful symbol of the power of intergenerational harmony. As night fell, glowing lanterns were released into the sky, carrying prayers and hopes for a world where everyone, regardless of age, is treated with respect and dignity. In that quiet moment, Mike Tyson stood alone by the statue, looking up at the starry sky. He could feel Mrs. Lan's presence, not as a ghost, but as a living legacy, a reminder that small acts of kindness can create waves of change far beyond our imagination. "Thank you, Mrs. Lan," Mike whispered, "for teaching me and the world this lesson." And in that moment, it seemed as if the stars in the sky over Hanoi were a little brighter, as if Mrs. Lan were smiling at him from somewhere far away, pleased with what they had created together, a world where no one had to stand alone at the crossroads of life. And just like that, the story of the former world boxing champion and the Vietnamese grandmother became a modern legend, not just a story of a heroic act, but of the ability of people to see each other across all boundaries, and of the transformative power of simple kindness and respect. Vietnamese children for generations to come will hear about Mrs. Lan and the kind giant, not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder that true heroes don't necessarily wear capes, and that,